Let's build a super simple nether tree farm. I'm super excited for this one because I absolutely love nether trees and shroomlights and all of the stuff that comes with it. And best of all, it's crazy cheap and easy to build for absolutely insane rates. Get all of the warp stems and crimson stems, shroomlights and leaves that you could possibly need. As for the rates, we're looking at about 40,000 items per hour at a log to leaf ratio of about 1 to 27. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 37,500 logs per hour at a consumption rate of around 865 TNT and 12,000 bone meal. Now you can compost the leaves back down into bone meal at an average rate of 8 bone meal per stack of leaves. So you can get a return, and you can get an even bigger return by harvesting some of the leaves by hand. But we'll talk more about that near the end of the video, when we go over customization options, bug fixes, and other important information. Now, while we won't get shroomlights in a fully AFK manner, they will build up the longer you AFK, allowing for easy collection later on. And if we strip away all of the logs and the leaves, we can see that the redstone is crazy simple, crazy cheap, and super compact, especially for the rates that it provides. I mean, nearly 40,000 logs per hour blows all other tree farms out of the water. So if you're just looking for wood and you don't want to build a bamboo farm, the nether trees would definitely be the way to go. But if you're looking for other types of wood, I also have this super simple basic oak farm, as well as this tall tree farm that works for jungle, spruce, and birch, and has oak options. And maybe even more designs available by the time you're watching this video, because next up I'm going to start messing with 2x2 trees and funky trees and universal designs to see what all we can do. And of course, we will need fungus in order to grow the trees. But luckily, I just posted a fungus farm, which I will link here on the screen. The total build area is 21 by 22. And we need to mark out a 2x4 area that is 10 blocks from the left and the back, 9 blocks from the front, and 8 blocks from the right. For a basic storage system, we're going to surround this with 4 double chests. But you can make any kind of collection system that you want, as long as it's collecting at ×8 hopper speed. Meaning that we need 8 hoppers in this area that are each pushing into their own container to maintain the ×8 hopper speed going in and going out. So as an example, you could use this ×8 speed shulker loader that I will link here on the screen. You can just follow that tutorial and then just alter the input, like you see here, to maintain the ×8 speed all the way through. So from the base design, we would need to turn the top 4 hoppers into 8, so that we can then place double chests on top of each section with 2 hoppers pointed into each chest. That way we can maintain 4 double speed hopper inputs going through while shifting over the 2x4 hopper area to match what we're building in this video. But regardless of your storage system, we need to place wooden fence posts on all of the hoppers except for these front middle 2. On those, we need to place rails with hoppers pointed down at those rails, and then break out the front chest if you have it, so that we can place a minecart with hopper on one of the rails, push it to the side, break the rail, and then push it back into the corner, so that all 4 of the hoppers can pull from that cart. And now we just need to do it again. So place another minecart on the other rail, push it off to the side, break the rail, and then shove it into the corner. So that now we have 2 quad speed sections. Oh, and then replace that chest there in the front, which I totally forgot about, if you're building the simple storage system. But then here on the back, we're going to go back by 3 slabs in a 2 wide area aligned with the hoppers, and then surround all of that diagonally up in solid blocks, so that we have a 2x4 hole. Now on the back side, the one that's opposite of the hoppers, we're going to go back by 6 slabs. And then on all of the 3 other sides, we're going to go back by 7 slabs, and then fill it completely in, so that we're left with an 18 by 19 platform that is mostly made out of slabs just to keep it cheap, with a hole in the middle. But then place a solid block on all 4 corners and surround the platform all the way around with more blocks. So this is what you will have. Now on the back left side, the opposite one from the hoppers in the hole, we're going to place a solid block in the corner with a lever on top, and then diagonally from that lever, we're going to place 3 scaffolding and a button on top, any kind of button. And then from the block that the lever is placed on, we're going to go diagonally down with a block, over with 2, diagonally down, and diagonally up, so that we're left with this right here. Now on this rightmost block, we're going to place a Redstone Torch, and then a Comparator on subtraction mode that is looking at the block that the lever is placed on. And then 3 Redstone Dust in these positions, with glass on top of these 2, a solid block right here in the corner, 2 dust going up that block and glass, then a Comparator on top of the other glass, going into a dispenser that is pointed up. And then on top of and next to that dispenser, we want to place 2 of the same color Nylium, whichever you want to farm. And we can switch those out later on. But we want an observer looking at the back of that Nylium, a copper bulb being looked at by that Comparator, and then a solid block to connect that to the observer. Then we want 2 solid blocks, 1 on each side of the Nylium, then 1 on top of this torch with a Redstone Dust on top, and then 2 dispensers on top of these blocks pointed toward the Nylium. Now we could just load bone meal directly into the dispensers, but to increase the storage, all we have to do is place a hopper pointed into the side of each dispenser, and then 2 more hoppers on each side, one pointing into the first hopper and the other pointing into the dispenser. That way both dispensers are being loaded by 2 hoppers, maintaining double hopper speed, and then we can place a double chest on top of the outermost hoppers, so that chest is being unloaded at double hopper speed. Then on top of this observer, we want 10 regular pistons going up that are facing toward the Nylium. Then on the back side, starting down here on top of that block, we want to place solid blocks on every other piston going up, and then extend them out to the side by 1 block of glass, and then we want more glass to turn this into a zigzag. So we just want a zigzag of glass that is connected to those solid blocks. And the topmost glass needs to be aligned with that topmost piston. But then we're going to place dust on top of all of this stuff except for the topmost diagonal glass. So redstone dust going all the way down. Then above each of the chests, we want to place 4 upper slabs. So there will be a half block gap above the chest between the slab. But then on the left section, we're going to place a repeater facing toward the piston, being powered by a lever. Then on the other side, we're going to place 3 dust, so it connects with that line going up, a block of glass above that dust, and above that one. So the glass will be diagonally from each other. But then we're going to place a dropper facing down, aligned with that dust, diagonally down from the glass, with a button on the bottom of that dropper. So these 2 buttons are right above the scaffolding. Then place dust on top of the dropper. And these random blocks of glass are just to keep leaves from growing there, because nether leaves are solid and will pinch dust. And likewise, we need to prevent the leaves from growing on top of the dispensers and hoppers. So either place torches or buttons on top of them to prevent the leaf growth so that we can maintain access to load in our bone meal. Because these trees can grow all over the place, and the leaves are solid so it can mess with redstone. But now we just need to turn on the lever, which we should hear the clock activating the dispensers, and then in front of the repeater, we need to place in solid blocks until the pistons can no longer push them out. And then once we've reached the maximum number of blocks that the pistons can push, we will turn off the lever and then go over to the very end. And from this last block, we're going to go down by 3, which should then be aligned with that bottommost piston. Then we're going to go diagonally down and back with another block, and then we're going to skip 5 blocks and do it again, so that we have 2 legs that have 5 blocks of air in between them. And then just connect these feet diagonally up with a row of solid blocks. And then we can break out all of our measuring blocks so that we are left with this. That will be 4 blocks away from the scaffolding and the Nylium. And now on top of these legs, these little sticky out parts, we're going to go up on each one by 10 pistons. So these pistons will be perfectly aligned with the 10 pistons over there on top of the observer. And then we can just break out these bottommost blocks, making sure that these pistons are in fact aligned with the ones over there. But then here on the back, on every other piston going up, we're just going to make more rows of solid blocks until we get to the very top. And on this top one, we're going to go diagonally up with solid blocks to make this little triangle thing here at the top. And then over on this far side, we're going to place a block of glass next to every row, and then turn it into a zigzag of glass, like so. So that now all of these rows are connected through a zigzag of glass. And these bottom 2 glass actually need to be solid blocks. So just replace those with solid blocks, and then come around here to the front, and we're going to place some temporary blocks so that we can have a piece of glass right here and place a torch on the side of this glass that will be diagonally down in front of that piston. Then go up by a block and over by a block. And then we're going to place 2 dust starting from that glass going up, then a repeater going into that block, and then dust on top of all of these rows, on top of the zigzag and on top of all of these blocks, so that now all of the pistons are tied together. And then we can test it by placing any solid block directly above that torch, which should then activate both rows of pistons, pushing those blocks forward. But then up here at the very, very top, we're going to go diagonally up and forward by 2 solid blocks, place dust on the lower one, and a dropper on top of the upper one, facing away, into a hopper that is pointed into its face. Make sure they are pointed into each other. And then inside of this dropper, we want 4 of any item. Doesn't matter what this item is, we just want 4 items. But then we want a comparator that is looking at this dropper, going into a solid block that has a torch on top, like so. Above this torch, we're going to place a solid block, and next to the torch, we're going to place 6 blocks in this pattern right here. Then a redstone torch above the hopper, and a comparator pointed into this corner block, and then a comparator pointed the other direction next to that, connected together by 3 dust, like so. Then on top of this block, we're going to go up with blocks and torches until we have a total of 3 torches. So 3 torches from that bottommost comparator. Then next to this topmost torch, we're going to go forward by 7 blocks, like so, then break out the next to last one, and then here at the end, we're going to go up by 7 more, so that we have a vertical row of 8 there at the end. Then we want a dispenser facing toward the vertical row next to that block that has the torch underneath, and then a button directly opposite of that dispenser. And then surround this with 10 blocks to create this canal, so that we can place a bucket of water in front of the dispenser that will get stopped by the button. And then place any block above the water source to prevent the TNT from bouncing up and down. And now this dispenser is one of your TNT dispensers, so you can load TNT in it, but we will need access to this later on so that we can load more TNT. But then from this top block, we're going to go over with torches and blocks until we have a total of 4 side torches. Then from the topmost block above the top torch, we're going to go forward with blocks until we're 1 away from that vertical row. And then on this very end above the torch, we're going to place a dust going into 4 max delay repeaters. So 4 max delay repeaters going into a dispenser facing forward. So this dispenser will be aligned with the one down there. And then we can break out that block, place a button on this far wall opposite of the dispenser, and create another canal. So that just like before, we can place a bucket of water in front of the dispenser and then cap that water with any block to prevent the TNT from bouncing up and down. And this is your second TNT dispenser. So you can load that one up with TNT as well. And now we are basically done. All that's left is to flood our collection platform. So on all 4 walls, except for next to the corners, we want to place buckets of water. Do not place buckets of water next to the corner blocks, or it'll create more sources and you'll have to get rid of the water and it'll be a pain. But if everything was the right size, the water should flow right up to the edge of this center hole on 3 of the sides. But on the back side, the one that is opposite from where the hoppers are, the water should overlap and flow down and toward the hoppers. But really, you can make that water platform at any size or shape. It doesn't really matter. It's just a collection platform. But to actually use the farm, first off, we need to load in bone meal into the chests, keeping in mind that this will use about 12,000 bone meal per hour. And know that one of the 2 sides will use more bone meal than the other. So if you notice that something isn't wrong, that's just how it is. But then in this topmost dropper, we can put in extra fungus so that it feeds us fungus as we plant them to allow us to grow more than 64 fungus at a time. And last but not least, we need to place some bone meal into this bottommost dispenser. And what this dispenser does is make sure that the Nylium never dies, because this grows trees so quickly that occasionally the Nylium will die and turn into netherrack, which prevents you from growing fungus. And so we need that bottom circuit and that bottom dispenser to refresh the Nylium. But to actually use the farm, we just turn on the lever, stare at the Nylium or at this bottommost piston, and hold down the place button, and you'll just infinitely place fungus. You know, you can use a rubber band or prop something against your mouse or controller to make it fully AFK. But then if we want to change what color tree we're growing, we just swap out the Nylium. You know, swap it out for the red or the green, and then grab the corresponding fungus, place some in this dropper for longer AFK sessions, and that's it. That's how you switch between the trees. Now if the bottommost dispenser ever runs out of bone meal, this back bulb will be turned on. And you never want that bulb to be turned on. So if you see that it's on, just place a button, press the button to turn it off. That bulb should basically always be turned off, because that bulb in the observer is what will refresh the Nylium if it dies. A customization option that I really enjoy is making it easier for us to harvest the tops of the trees by hand, because these trees grow really tall, and there are tons of leaves and logs and Shroomlights just ripe for the picking. But all we have to do is build a slab or solid block platform directly on top of the pre-existing redstone. Just be sure not to pinch any of the dust like this one right here. So be sure not to use a solid block right there. But the trees will actually grow straight through blocks. So building a platform just makes it easier for us to harvest, as well as prevents us from accidentally breaking any of the pre-existing redstone. You know, we wouldn't want to break any of the machine. But also, it seems like Shroomlights accumulate over time. I'm not sure if they replace the existing leaves as they grow, but if you AFK this for long enough, you end up with this massive cluster of Shroomlights buried inside of the leaves. So you can actually get a fair amount of Shroomlights during this process. Now the very first TNT used by this farm will not blow up the intended area. There won't be enough logs in place. But after that very first one, there will be logs in the intended area. Now we're actually dispensing TNT every 8 trees grown. But the trees grow so fast that a bunch will grow while the counter is resetting itself. So it actually blows up more than 8 trees at a time. Now if you encounter a problem and the machine locks down because you ran out of TNT or because the world is insanely laggy or something, there are ways to fix this. But first we need to clear out the logs that are in the growing chamber, and then we need to go over to the TNT section, reload TNT if it ran out, but then place a button on the side of this block right here so that we can manually dispense a TNT to clear out the logs that are in the farm. Because if it runs out of TNT, or if a problem happens, it will just fill completely up with logs and they'll back up. We also need to remove a few of the rows here on the very back, and then replace any kind of solid block down at the very bottom. We want the bottommost row, where it triggers these pistons, to have more blocks than the rest of the sections, to prevent a mismatch or to prevent some weird stuff from happening. Now if the problem arises just because you ran out of TNT, you're good. But if the problem happened and you still have TNT loaded, after clearing everything out and replacing logs down at the very bottom, there's a few adjustments that we can make, depending on what went wrong. For one, we can break out that corner block and replace it with dust. This will shorten the extender, which will allow it to dispense TNT slightly faster. So that should compensate for crazy lag. But if it's still locking down, even after that change, we can simply remove one item from this dropper, and that will cause it to dispense TNT even more frequently. And so the more frequently that we dispense the TNT, the more wiggle room it will have to make sure it never fills up with logs and locks down. So if your trees are just growing way too fast, those two changes will just increase the rate of the TNT to make sure it doesn't ever fill up. Now if these pistons down at the end are not firing at the same time, if they're leaving some logs behind like this, first clear out some of the logs and be sure to place extra blocks down at the very bottom to give it time to flush itself. But if those pistons are still not pushing out full rows and they're leaving blocks behind, then increase the delay on that repeater. That repeater down there will give the logs more time to get pushed in front of these pistons before the pistons actually push them out. That will make that section of pistons more stable, giving it more breathing room. But now the first section, we can also delay this as well, if need be. We can unbury this lever in this repeater, and then place a second repeater underneath that glass where that dust was. But we still need to trigger the dropper that gives us fungus. So we need to place a target right there to redirect the dust to power that dropper. This will add a delay between the tree growing and the trees getting pushed out. So this will compensate for two things. One, if these pistons are trying to push the trees out before the trees actually grow, or if the trees are getting pushed out too quickly to where the other sets of pistons can't keep up, or where the TNT can't keep up, thus preventing it from locking down because the first section fills up too quickly. But really, none of that should apply to most of you. Even with crazy world lag or crazy server lag, it should just work as intended as it is. But it's always good to know these things because, you know, Mojang likes to break the game. And I know that a lot of servers are really bogged down from like portal ticking gold farms or unoptimized farms or pending tick buildup and stuff. So it's like, if the world is broken or if Mojang breaks something, it's always good to know how we can fix these things or how we can compensate for the nonsense. And luckily, it's just like a repeater tick here or a repeater tick there, and everything will work regardless of crazy things. And if you ever have any questions, want to share your builds, or find people to play with, you can always pop over to my Discord. The link is on my YouTube homepage and should be in the video description. It's full of knowledgeable and helpful people who would be more than happy to help you out and discuss all things Minecraft. But that's all we got for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. A big shout out to all of my members on Patreon and everyone who supports me, and to you for watching. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that you do. Always remember that you are totally awesome, but above all, don't forget to have fun. Bye bye.